Welcome to today's live chat here on YouTube and also on Facebook. So it's a little Q&A today. I'm just going to make sure that the live is actually going out. I have my phone here just to keep an eye on things. So it looks like it is live. So we're going to start today talking a little bit about... Is it live? Yes, it is. Okay, so we're going to start today talking a little bit about the challenge that's going on at the moment. So we have a 30-day pelvic floor challenge that is running on the channel at the minute on YouTube. Now, this is a challenge mostly focused on people that are trying to regain control or to build strength. So that can be people that are suffering from incontinence or pelvic organ prolapse or other conditions where there is weakness. Now there is in each of the videos a little section at the end for relaxation. Very important, even if you're working on strength, that you also do a little bit of relaxation. So if you're doing the challenge, I hope that you're enjoying it so far. We are on day 3 today. So each day we are doing this week the controlled contractions. So with an RPE, a rate of perceived effort of 4 on the RPE scale. Now, if you're not familiar with the rate of perceived effort, we could explain it by thinking about how it is in the gym. So the amount of effort that it would take, for example, for you to do a dumbbell curl, for somebody that has a very strong bicep, they could use the same amount of effort to do a 20 kilo bicep curl as maybe I could use to do a 3 kilo bicep curl. So we're both using the same amount of effort, but the weight that we're lifting is different. And it just is a way to measure so that you know, okay, I'm going as hard as I can, or I'm taking, you know, I'm doing a certain amount of effort. I'm not going all the way to as hard as I possibly can. So hopefully that's clear, and hopefully everybody is understanding that. And let's see, now we have a few. Okay, now I can see that it's live. I wasn't sure a little moment ago, but I'll just talk a little bit more about what's going to happen in the challenge as we go forward. So throughout this week, there's more positions that we're going to do these controlled contractions. So where we're taking an RPE of 4 and holding that contraction for an extended period. Eventually, you will be able to practice like a full yoga sequence for 90 minutes, holding that RPE 4 contraction from the beginning of the practice all the way through to the end. This is known as Mula Bandha in yoga, and there is tomorrow evening going to be a small yoga class released on the channel where you will do exactly that. So if you're doing the challenge, you have the opportunity to actually practice holding your contraction through a number of different little sequences. And then next week we're going to be working on co-contractions. So this is where we'll go a little bit stronger on the contraction, and we'll also co-contract other muscles. So there's some different things that we'll do next week, and it'll be with a little bit more movement. So it's all kind of isometric this week, where, you know, we're staying in a single position when we're taking these contractions, and we're going to start a little bit of movement next week. So if any of you are doing the challenge and you have some questions, please feel free to add them in the chat box. I can see we have a few people online. No questions yet. We had lots and lots of questions the last couple of weeks. So maybe we should talk a little bit about pelvic pain. So I've had a lot of questions about pelvic pain, and actually I have a question now. Let's just put this one on the screen. So Harry is asking, I have tissue that is hardened in my pelvic area, not sure what it is, hurts extra when I do deadlifts. Do you have any idea what it could be? MRI showed nothing. So it could be connective tissue that is a little bit scarred, or it also could be where one of the muscles might have become either very hypertonic or possibly a little injured while you were doing something, and then that would also feel very hard. So it really depends on how it feels. You could, if you went to a pelvic floor physiotherapist, they'd actually be able to feel it and to tell you what it is. Now, if it's scar tissue, your pelvic floor physiotherapist or an osteopath will be able to help you to break it up. But also the pelvic floor relaxation exercises. There's quite a few videos on the channel with pelvic floor relaxation exercises. They're all yin yoga type exercises, and they take the tissue, you basically take the tissue into tension and you relax into that tension, and that can also help with the breaking up of scar tissue. And also, if it is a hypertonic muscle, those extended holds in the relaxation exercises, they send a message through to the nervous system to tell the nervous system to let go of the hold. One other thing that you can try is if you press as with the same level of pressure that you would use to check for the ripeness of a piece of fruit. If you press on that hard area with your finger and just hold that for between 60 and 90 seconds, if it relaxes and softens, then you know that it's a hypertonic muscle. So that's something that you can try. So I hope that one helped. And we have another question here from Jer. Hi Denise, when doing pelvic lifts, sometimes a testicle retracts all the way in. I pop it down again easily enough, but is that normal? Should I stop and get it checked out? I would say to get it checked out. There is a certain amount of movement that can happen, but for it to retreat completely, I'm not sure if that would be normal. It would be good to, if you go to a pelvic floor physiotherapist, they will likely have you do a lift in the clinic, and they'll be able to check while you're doing the lift. And the pelvic floor physiotherapists are well used to dealing with the pelvic floor and all of the little things that hang around in that area. So don't be shy about going and getting checked. So that would be my advice to you. I hope that helps. Let's see. We have another question here from, Harry. I'm sorry I showed that. Thank you. You're very welcome. Let's see, where's that other question? Here we go. Is there any difference between relaxing, stretching and lengthening of a pelvic floor muscle? Yes, there's a little bit of a difference. So you can relax your pelvic floor without stretching anything. So we can all do it right now. So we can just relax the body, allow everything to be soft. You can take an inhalation, and with the inhalation, there is a little bit of downward pressure. You should feel a little bit of expansion in the pelvic floor when you do that inhalation, and that is relaxing the pelvic floor. So you can actually let go of your muscles without actually having to stretch anything. Now, there's different types of stretching. So you can if you relax a muscle and stretch it at the same time, then you can get a little bit more of a release. And when it comes to the pelvic floor, so I have a little pelvis here. The pelvic floor, it's a multi-layer structure that sits at the base of the pelvis. So this is a little pelvis. And there's a tiny little bit of nutation in the pelvis. So a small amount of movement. Now this can move quite a lot, but that's not really how it is. It's literally on the SI joints at the back, you have a few millimeters. And on the pubic symphysis at the front, you'd also maybe have a few millimeters. So that's very little movement that you get out of this structure. Now, there is a little bit of opening in this structure whenever you take movement. So when you go into these stretching positions, it's not so much the movement of the pelvis that's creating the stretch. When you're moving your legs, you're pulling on the connective tissue, and that is reaching in, because the connective tissue actually runs right through the pelvic floor. So that's reaching in and giving that a good pull. So when it comes to relaxing the pelvic floor, you can relax it without stretching. You can relax it with stretching, which is it's a very effective way to let go of hypertonicity. And what was the other question? And lengthening. So when it comes to hypertonicity, you have a length tension relationship in not just within the muscle itself, but also with groups of muscle in relation to each other, and with the relation between antagonist and agonist. So there's lots of different relationships, and that's where the length tension comes in. So that's where the length of a muscle becomes relevant. A hypertonic muscle, if you consider that these are, let's say that these are the filaments in a muscle, a good length tension relationship will allow that there is stretch and that there is contraction available in a muscle. So you can go like this, but the resting length is kind of bang in the middle. When you need to lengthen a muscle is if the muscle's resting length is really short, because then there's nowhere to go for contraction. So then it's really important to encourage that to lengthen out so that you get a resting length that is here. So the resting length is important rather than the length itself per se. When it comes to the pelvic floor, you want to be able to relax. That means that you can let go of tension without taking any movement. You want to do some stretches so that you actually help to lengthen the tissue by giving a little pull. That communicates to the nervous system to let go of tension if there is hypertonicity, so then you can get it that it's a wee bit shorter. But also then if you get the resting length to come to a more optimal length. And if you've been doing a lot of contractions where you're shortening the muscle, you help to kind of bring it back into balance. Hope that answered your question. Let me see, there's a few more questions coming in here. Let's see. Alita is saying, I'm in the early pregnancy and just recently started accidentally peeing during intercourse. Is this a sign of a weak pelvic floor? Fourth pregnancy and have never had this before. It can be a sign of a weak pelvic floor, but it can also just be a sign of excess pressure. So it may be that the way the baby is lying on the bladder is creating the right conditions so that when something comes into the vagina, there's too much pressure on the bladder, and that's causing what I would call like a skeet pee, where the pressure it pushes the urine out. And of course, when you're having intercourse, you need to be able to relax your pelvic floor. It's very important. The contractions of orgasm only happen when the pelvic floor is relaxed. So that's going to probably make you a little bit more tense. Now, the thing about adding the tension is that can reduce the amount of enjoyment you get, but it can also add extra pressure. So try to relax. Try not to worry if there is a little bit of leakage. When you'll know whether or not there is proper weakness in the pelvic floor is after the pregnancy. But you can actually practice pelvic floor exercises during the pregnancy. I wouldn't go crazy doing the biggest, hardest, fastest pelvic floor contractions, but it is good to do, just some little control exercises. Could focus on the front portion of your pelvic floor, on just trying to get a little bit of a squeeze and lift on that front portion. And that might help a little bit with that that type of incontinence. I hope that helps. Let's see. Yeah, when we think about any incontinence, we're looking at the weight of the baby. Hang on, I see there's another. Oh, you're doing the 30-day challenge. That's great. That will actually help quite a lot. The weight of the baby can be quite substantial, and literally your baby could move in your womb and then you've got no pressure hardly on the bladder. So a lot can change through pregnancy. Another question we had last week was around prolapse. So I see you're on your fourth pregnancy. So there's a lot of people, if they have a prolapse, if they develop a prolapse after pregnancy and they have a subsequent pregnancy, the prolapse can actually regress. So it can disappear after a subsequent pregnancy. And that can also be because there's scarring after pregnancy, and a subsequent pregnancy can break up that scar tissue. So we did talk a little bit earlier about hardness on the pelvic floor, and that can be scar tissue. The way to think about your pelvic floor is that it's like an elastic structure, and you have a lot of connective tissue. The muscular tissues have fibers that all run in one direction, and in the pelvic floor you have muscles that come from lots of different directions, which is why we break the pelvic floor exercise down into all of these different types of contractions. So we're trying to bring different bits together so that we get all of those different fibers in all of those different directions. Now, the muscle fibers are all like little, let's say they're like little elastics, they're all straight, but the connective tissue fibers are different. So they actually run in a double lattice. So a little bit like, the net that the oranges come in, or, the avocados, if you buy them, and that has like a double lattice pattern on it. So this means that you have, let's say you have your muscle tissues running this way, and then you have connective tissues that run kind of lattice over that. The connective tissue is distributing load. And if you want the pelvic floor to function properly, you want everything to have good length, and you want the load to be able to distribute properly. You have a lot of intraabdominal pressures and things putting pressure downwards, and a lot of ground reaction force pressures coming up as well from the floor. If you can get everything kind of working in lots of different directions, that really helps with control, and it can really help as well if there's hypertonicity. That's very often because the balance of tension through the pelvic floor isn't going the way it should. So if you can get hypertonicity to let go, and if you can get any scar tissue or connective tissue adhesions to kind of loosen out a little bit, that can make the pelvic floor a lot more functional, because it can move in an easier way and expand where it needs to, when it needs to, without leakage. So I hope that little explanation was a little bit useful. Do we have any more questions? We might even get finished today early if there's no more questions. We had a lot of questions last week. Is there anything maybe, if we think a little bit about pelvic tension and pain? So I know there's a lot of people on the channel who are here because of pelvic pain. And obviously we're doing the 30-day challenge that is more focused on strength. And I did get a question during the week on email about actually working on strength when you have pelvic pain. For anybody who has tension or pain or hypertonicity in the pelvic floor, I would suggest focusing on getting the tension to relax and to loosen out a wee bit first. Once you get to a stage where you don't have to do pelvic floor relaxation exercises every day in order to not have pain, then you can assess your pelvic floor. Now, don't go straight into doing pelvic floor exercises ever. Assess first. So if you sign up to the challenge, there is a document you can click through to a bonus video that will actually go through how to do a pelvic floor assessment. If you assess your pelvic floor and you find that something's not responding, then it's good to do pelvic floor exercises. Otherwise, the goal would be to regain strength, to get good balance in the pelvic floor, and then to not have to do endless repetitions of pelvic floor exercises. Yes, K9, you have another question. Please do go ahead and ask. That's what I'm here for. This is my little question and answer session. And now I'm quiet. The funny thing about these lives is that there's nobody talking to me, so it feels a little bit strange when I'm doing all the talking. I actually did a podcast with Dr. Bree during the week. I don't know if any of you are familiar with her. I'll be releasing that one in a couple of days. She's got some fantastic videos on pelvic floor relaxation, and also lots of pelvic floor exercises and lots of fitness exercises. She's a book called Lady Bits, really good and really interesting. So I'm thinking of doing a few more of those. So I did actually, when I started the channel, I did have a couple of different podcasts going, and I'm thinking of doing a few more. But I'm not sure if that's interesting. Of course, if it is interesting, then I would be more than happy to do that. I released yesterday a video for pelvic floor relaxation, and tomorrow there's a yoga video coming. So I'm going to do that now. Tuesdays and Thursdays, it'll be relaxation on Tuesdays and yoga for the pelvic floor on Thursdays. And then if there's any other things that you think would be interesting, you can ask for that as well. And let's see. So K9, while researching online, I've read that many places that improvements and relief from static stretching alone do not last long and are generally short-lived. Stretching and relaxing the surrounding, the rest of it's not there. I think maybe you have to keep typing. But the thing about all of the treatments that you can get is that no one of them is going to be, let's say, the fix. In the book, I have lots of different things. Okay, so you have the next part. Relaxing the surrounding muscles, glutes, TVA also play a role. Do you agree with all of that? I do. You have to do. You have to really take a holistic approach when it comes to your pelvic floor. When it comes to any part of your body, actually, if you have any kind of an injury, or like, it doesn't matter if it's a shoulder problem or a problem with your Achilles, or maybe it's a hamstring issue, a core issue, it doesn't matter where the issue is. If you only do stretching, for example, or if you only do one thing, you're not really going to get to the bottom of that. The key for me is to actually approach yourself from a very holistic perspective, because you have to realize that what you think is impacting your body. So doing anything without approaching the way you think is also not going to be very effective. If you only do stretching and lengthening exercises, it's not going to be enough. If you only do massage, it's not going to be enough. If you only do like heat or cold therapies, it's not going to be enough. Only doing hyperpressives. the way that I see it is that you have to, it's the nervous system that you're trying to get through to, because the nervous system, it is what helps to manage and balance tension. If your dysfunction is a dysfunction that creates excess tension, then you need to actually look at the body. The body is a unity, and all of the systems in the body interact together. There is a connectedness to everything. It's not, so long as you look at yourself as separate bits and pieces and you only address that bit, then you're missing actually getting to the root cause of your problem. And when you do actually take a holistic approach, you'll try very many different things. The challenge is when everything is okay again, you're not going to be able to put your finger and go, it was this thing that I did that made it better. When I wrote the book, I wrote the book because I was completely incontinent with a prolapse after having the mesh implanted and the rectocele repair, and they took the mesh away, and I was left in a really bad state. I did not think, like, they told me that I would never be continent again, and I didn't think I would, but I was really determined. I was really, really determined that I would get over it. I had an overactive bladder. I couldn't stand up without wetting myself. It was absolutely horrendous. Nobody should have to go through that. But I did very many different things to get over that. And through the journey, my body went through so much, my mind went through so much. But what I learned was that it wasn't, doing one single thing wasn't going to get me there. And when it was all done and I decided I would write the book, I couldn't say that you just need to do this. Like, anybody who's doing the 30-day challenge, just doing the pelvic floor exercises isn't going to resolve all your issues. The muscles in your legs are going to have an impact on your pelvic floor. Your core is going to have an impact on your pelvic floor. Your diaphragm, your shoulders, your hearing, your eyesight. It'll blow your mind when you start to really kind of get into it, what can have an impact. So you need to look at the whole system of the body. And I'm very much of the belief that the business of your body's movement is controlled by your nervous system. And if you can get when things are dysfunctional, normally reflexes, movement, everything happens bottom up. So everything is happening, basically, it's lots of signals bouncing between the spinal cord and further out in the periphery, so out into the peripheral nervous system. Those little interactions are reflexive. So you don't have the stumble reflex, a really good example. You don't have to think when you're walking along and you go to trip, oh, no, I'm falling. I need to make this muscle contract and make these movements to stop myself. The stumble reflex happens from there's some local interactions that happen just because muscles have stretched a bit. So there's a lot of protective responses, contractions that will happen just because of that movement. But then there's other reflexive actions that will smooth everything out. Now, when there's dysfunction in the body and dysfunction in the muscles, so for example, in the pelvic floor, the bottom up isn't happening properly. So then you have to take top down control. But top down, for example, if you go to stumble, and if you don't use any bottom up and you have to just think about what you're going to do, it'll take about 120 milliseconds for the signal to go from your brain down to your body to do whatever it is that you're trying to do to stop. And in that time, you will have fallen over. So to come all the way back, you have to retrain the nervous system to use bottom-up control. And when we look at this 30-day challenge that we're doing, we're starting on this trying to get everything to interact together. So we're trying to get all of the pelvic floor to lift, and we're trying to gain a little bit of control of holding it. Now, when you've done that enough, the nervous system will do it naturally. It'll do it automatically. It'll be a bottom-up response rather than a top-down request. And the same thing goes for the co-contractions that we're going to be training next week. Eventually, you're not going to have to think, I have to engage, I have to hold, I have to do these things. They will happen naturally. It's like the pelvic floor contractions. You're not going to always have to keep squeezing your pelvic floor to make sure that it functions. If you can do it consistently enough, but along with training, for example, the balance of tension through the lower limb, the balance of tension through the upper limb, how your body responds when you're pulling, when you're pushing, and all these different things, then you will actually get to a stage where what happens in the periphery is you don't have to think about it. It's automated, and that is the bottom-up response. That is thoughtless, fearless movement. And that is actually what we all want to get to. So I hope that answers your question. That's what my book is all about, actually. It's about retraining the balance of tension in the body and getting the nervous system back on board so that things become reflexive once again. And when it comes to incontinence, for those of you that are suffering from incontinence, that is, that of course, the continence is a reflexive action. It's not something you ever had to think about. But those reflexes, they are still there. They don't really disappear. So there is always somewhere a little memory of them. And it's easier to get your nervous system back on board if you can find the memory of your continence, if you can remember this sensation, which it's very easy to say, when you're continent, it's very easy to say, remember how it felt to be continent. And I don't mean how it felt to not wet yourself. That's a different thing. I mean the actual sensation in your body. The actual feeling of, I'm holding my pee, I don't want to go now, so I'm not going to go now. That feeling, if you're continent now, put it in your memory bank, right? Which is, put it into your memory, remember it. Because if someday, which very, very possibly may happen some day in the future when you're over 65, the chances of developing incontinence are pretty high. If you can remember what continence felt like, it's going to be much easier to get yourself back to everything being okay. So, oh, I have a bunch more questions and I've just been waffling on, sorry. Chelsea says, I have no questions today, but just want to say your advice and sessions really helped me a lot. Thank you. So you're very, very welcome. I'm glad that helps. And let's see, can you talk about, okay, I'll put this one up. Let me take this one away. So question from Sonia, can you talk about how to manage intra-abdominal pressure, please? Yes. So when the first step in managing intra-abdominal pressure is learning to breathe properly. So when it comes to breathing, there are 4 different phases of breath. So you have quiet inspiration and quiet expiration. The quiet inspiration is when you breathe in, you're not breathing in, when your body breathes in for you, and that's using your diaphragm and a little bit of the internal intercostals, excuse me. And the quiet expiration uses no muscles. So that's basically just it's Boyle's law. It's the pressure differential between atmospheric pressure and the reduced pressure you have in your lungs, rebalancing by pushing the air. I went wrong there. Your quiet inspiration is your diaphragm pulling the air into your lungs, yes. And the quiet expiration is the pulling of the air back out of your lungs, which is the rebalancing of pressure between atmospheric pressure and the pressure inside your lungs. Then you have forced inspiration and forced expiration. And they require accessory muscles. So then it's not just the diaphragm and the intercostals that are doing the work. So there you can also have some help from, say, for example, the SEM or the scalenes that will kind of lift the rib cage a little bit up. You can also have a little bit of help from the obliques that sometimes help to pump the air out. So you'll have a little bit of the abs will participate a little bit as well. So there's a little bit more involvement from other muscles. But if your quiet inspiration and your quiet expiration aren't happening as they should, so if they don't happen naturally, then your diaphragm isn't going to be as flexible as it should. So it's not going to sufficiently move basically all on its own. So then the relationship between the diaphragm and the pelvic floor aren't going to be functioning. So there isn't going to be a lot of movement there. Now, the reason that that's the first place you have to look is because when it comes to intra-abdominal pressure, if you're not using your breathing muscles and expanding the rib cage in order to do the breathing, then you have to use accessory muscles, which means that you're either going to be lifting your rib cage using your shoulders and your scalenes and your sternocleidomastoid, or you're going to be squeezing your abs to pump the air out instead of that happening naturally. And if that's every breath, then that's a lot of intra-abdominal pressure that's going to be going downwards to a pelvic floor that isn't moving naturally with the diaphragm. I hope I'm making sense now. Does that make sense to you, Sonia? Maybe you can let me know if that's making sense. So that's the first place you need to look is the breathing functioning properly? And there's some little exercises you can do to check, is the breathing functioning properly? Let me see. Anyhow, once you get the breathing functioning properly, so you need to come to a state where you can actually take away all of the muscles that should not be participating in quiet inspiration. You can do that by resting your back against the chair. So I can just show you here. Rest your back against the chair. Let your shoulders kind of collapse. Let your diaphragm collapse a little bit. So your chest is falling a little bit. Let the head hang, and then just close your mouth and just breathe quietly through your nose and without taking in any effort. So you just allow your body to breathe quietly, just like that. And when you do that, if you feel a little bit panicked, if you feel like you're not getting enough air in, that's an indication that accessory muscles are doing the work for quiet inspiration. And that's where you have to start. Now, once you get the breathing working properly, then you have to start to look at the abdominal canister. So there's 4 different layers of muscle on the abs. And what you need to do, well, first I would check to see, are all of those different layers functioning? So is everything held together, or do you have any herniation? So diastasis or other herniation in the abs. So you want to check there and see if everything's working. You also want to look to see, if we look here at the pelvis and the ribs, so they should be kind of level. If there's a little bit of hyperextension of the spine, you're going to have, if you can see there, the line, so that's too open. Or if there's a tucked pelvis and a collapsed chest, that's too closed. And if that's happening, then also the relationship between the diaphragm and the pelvic floor is going to be off. And that means that the pressure isn't going to move evenly. So a pelvic tilt, or any kind of a hunch, if you're carrying yourself with a closed posture, all of these things will have an impact on that relationship and on the balance of tension through the core. So the way that we work the balance of tension through the core is that we start with a very subtle activation of the core muscles to make sure that those muscles work first and foremost. They all need to be able to hold a little bit of tension. In order to manage intra-abdominal pressure, you have to be able to activate. And the co-contractions that we're going to do next week, where we activate the pelvic floor and we activate the core, and we kind of hold the canister steady, that's like the next step. Now, the stronger that you can make your core in conjunction with your pelvic floor, the easier it's going to be able to manage intra-abdominal pressure. If you get your breathing functioning properly, where everything is working, and you get your core working properly so that it's able to basically hold the core strong, but also allow relaxation and expansion when you're breathing along with the pelvic floor, then it's so much easier when it comes to managing the pressures. And then when you need to do lifting, so the video last week where we did lifting with the pelvic floor, you can actually create an upward pressure that's a little bit stronger than the pressure that you have on the core, and that really helps to make sure that you don't have like a big down push when you're doing your lifting. So there still is a little bit of expansion out to the sides when you're lifting, and that's how you manage it. I hope that made sense. I hope you got that. Let's see, who else do we have? So K9, you're saying you're just the opposite of incontinence. Yeah, if somebody gave you Kegel exercises for hypertonic pelvic floor, they need a wee slap on the back of the head. So don't do Kegels. Do relaxation exercises. That's very important. So Susan, you have is the 30-day challenge for prolapse, or is it for chronic pelvic pain? So it is more focused on prolapse and incontinence. It's focused on getting control and strength in the pelvic floor. But every video has relaxation at the end. So if you wanted to do like a relaxation pose, you can do the relaxation pose at the end of each video each day. The other thing, if you're already doing a relaxation video with a number of poses every day, then you don't need to do the 30-day challenge. If you do have pelvic tension or pelvic pain or any condition with hypertonicity, it's very important, particularly if you have pain, to do the pelvic floor relaxation exercises daily until the level of pain goes down. You can also do self-massage. That is a way to communicate with your nervous system through through touch, which is, so movement is one way to communicate, touch is another way to communicate, heat and cold, other ways to communicate. And these are all, and what you think, of course, and releasing tension with the likes of yoga nidra. These are all the ways of getting messages through to the nervous system to tell it to let go. And you need to use those until you come to a stage where there isn't a huge amount of tension. And then before you don't ever dream of doing any pelvic floor contractions until you actually assess and see, well, is there anything that's not functioning? Once you get hypertonicity to loosen out, hypertonic muscles, even though let's say they're overly contracted, they are not strong muscles. There's nowhere left for them to contract. And when you get them to relax out of it, they may have a good strong contraction, but sometimes they don't. So it's always good, once you get everything working and loosened up, it's always good to take a look. But do bear in mind, in response to K9's question a little bit earlier, just releasing the pelvic floor is never enough. You do have to look at other parts of the body. So there is a yoga video for vaginismus on the channel, and these are active exercises that are very good for pelvic tension. It is important to stretch all of the muscles in your body. Now, all of the pelvic floor exercise videos do work on yin type yoga, where you're working on allowing yourself to relax into your own tension. So that's stretching both the connective tissue and the muscles. But it's good also to do some active movement and also to look at the pattern of your daily life. So this is one of the things that we do in the book, is we identify patterns in the body, in the pelvic floor, in the mind, and in your life, because your lifestyle, the pattern of your lifestyle, is having an impact on your body. So you will see the pattern of what you do every day reflected in the tissues in your body. So that's very important to not forget about those things as well. Okay, I'm going to put I hope that answers your question. I'm going to put your question off. I see we have another one here from Laura. Can you have tight pelvic muscles while having the opposite of constipation? I can poo every day, and it's normal that my symptoms worsen after pooing. I also pee while pooing. Yeah, you can have a hypertonic pelvic floor and have no problem with defecation. Sometimes you'll have a hypertonic muscle that is up the front. Sometimes you can have a hypertonic anal sphincter, which can make it very difficult to poo. So where the hypertonicity is can have a big impact on the functions within the pelvic floor. So yeah, so it is normal. Now, if you're having diarrhea, so the opposite of constipation, maybe that's what you mean, I'm not sure. But if you're having diarrhea, that you need to have your gastrointestinal tract checked. So maybe there's some sort of a little bacteria in the tummy, or there's something there, or the diet is insufficient in fiber. And it's not, like, diarrhea and constipation are both not so good for the pelvic floor. And they're both generally an indication that something is a little bit off balance. Maybe you've seen the Bristol stool scale. I do have a Bristol stool scale on the channel on the fecal incontinence page. You can click into it there. And that shows what a perfect poo looks like, and it should be a 3 or a 4, so a nice smooth silky sausage. It should slide out, shouldn't require any real pushing or bearing down. It should do, like, basically the smooth muscle of the bowel should be sufficient to actually move it out, and if it's not, then you need to do something about it. And peeing while pooing is okay, because to poo you have to relax your pelvic floor, and relaxing the pelvic floor generally relaxes also for urination. So it's okay to do both at the same time. I would say even that it can be normal to do both at the same time. You don't have to, but it's not a problem. Now, if you have a follow-up question, if I didn't quite answer your question, please do feel free to answer. Kushla, you're on the Kushla Yoga. If anybody wants to do some yoga, the Kushla Yoga page on Facebook, they're doing yoga classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I did their yoga yesterday. It was really fantastic. Challenge is really good motivation. Thank you so much for the effort of putting it together. It's really helping me. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. You're very welcome. That's lovely. Let's see, what else have we got here? Oh, wow, there's so many. Yetunde, you're very welcome also. Rose, what would be your general approach? I'm going to put this one up. What would be your general approach to someone with many years of unresolved lower back pain, which is now believed to be connected to pelvic floor dysfunction? my approach always with lower back pain is to first address the front, because there's an antagonistic relationship between the muscles in the back, on the lower back. So you have on one side of the spine you have your QL muscles, and then on the other side you have the psoas, and they're providing a huge amount of support to the spinal column. But on the other side you have the abs, and generally they're a little bit antagonistic in nature. Now, it's not directly antagonistic, but it is very much if your core supports your low back. So if your core is weak, then your low back is going to be more prone to extension. So you're going to be more likely to be getting a little bit of kind of crunching there. So I would start by addressing the core to see, okay, is the core functioning? And a weak core will also have an impact on the pelvic floor. I would also look at the glutes and the lower limb to see, well, how are they working? Are the glutes strong? Are the legs balanced in the way that they manage tension when you're walking? It can be very useful to retrain the balance of tension in the lower limb if you're having problems around the hips and the low back and the pelvic floor. So I hope that helps. I would start by checking your core. And there's a lot of yoga that's really, really good. Like, a lot of yoga poses are really good for the low back and for low back pain and for helping with low back pain. So maybe you could try also to do some yoga. Let me see, where are we? So question from Yutunda. You might have mentioned this. I wondered if pelvic floor relaxation should be recommended for women suffering from endometriosis as part of their treatment. I found this very useful. Yes, indeed. If you have endometriosis or pelvic congestion syndrome or interstitial cystitis, there's quite a few conditions that have an impact around the functions in the pelvis that can be relieved through these particularly relaxation exercises or more gentle forms of yoga. And the reason for this is because very often these conditions are accompanied by pain, and pain generally is coming with tension, and the excess tension can actually exacerbate the pain, and you end up in this cycle of continual pain. Exercises communicate safety to the nervous system. Like, a lot of these relaxation stretches, they're communicating to the nervous system to let go of the tension, and that can really help. And also, there is an element of when you practice yoga. So when I'm teaching on the channel, I'm like chat, but no breath. But yoga is movement with breath, and breathing is so important. It also helps to calm the nervous system, and the breathing with movement, which is what yoga is all about, really helps to get everything to settle down a little bit. And the release of tension and the calming of the nervous system also helps to calm the mind and to settle things. And that can make a really, really big difference for pain. So I'm not surprised that you're finding it useful. I think many others, hopefully they'll see your comment also and they will take heed. Okay, let's see, where am I? So, a question from Laura. Is it normal to take Xanax for relaxing muscles down there? Otherwise, I really can't function during the day. Also, relaxation stretches every day. So, there are many doctors who will prescribe Xanax and quite a few other medications for getting the pelvic floor to relax. The studies into the efficacy and whether or not it really makes a difference, they're not very clear. So, if it makes you feel better, then and your doctor has prescribed it, then I would say do take them. You do need to listen to your doctor. If your doctor says, okay, this is the thing that you should try, and if it's working, then it's good. But if you're taking a medication and it's not making any difference to the pain, then I would question why you would continue to take that medication. Always, with anything you're doing, ask why. So if you're going to do a particular exercise, why? Understand what the benefit of doing that thing is. So obviously if you're having pelvic pain, you're working, maybe you heard a little bit earlier, the ways that you get to communicate safety to your nervous system so that it can let go of the excess tension and the pain. Working on the mind is really important. So working on the way that you think about your pain, because that impacts how it manifests. Working on movement as a way to communicate safety to the nervous system. So getting into those stretches that help to relieve the tension, self-massage, or, therapy from a physiotherapist, an occupational therapist, or a osteopath, any of these manual therapists, structural integrators, for example, anybody that's going to put their hands on and help to communicate with touch. Heat or cold. Heat tends to be better for chronic pain. Cold tends to be better for acute pain, but it does vary. So, you should try those. Sleep, of course, very important. And yeah, as much as possible, relaxation, but consistency. And I'm going to tell you this, that when your pain goes away, you are not going to be able to say it was this one thing. This thing that I did is what made my pain go away. And my own experience with pain was like that. I did so many things and I suffered really badly for a very long time. And when the pain went away, I actually couldn't say it was this one thing. I did this one thing. I don't know. I don't think it's possible to say exactly what it was. Hope that answers your question. Let's see what's next. Rose says her QL is definitely an issue. Very, very possibly. But if you can get your core to start functioning, and also if the QL is an issue, it has a very close relationship to the psoas. So if you can get your psoas maybe to, I would first work a little bit on getting the psoas to contract to see if that can allow the QL to relax. And then you could also work on getting the psoas to relax to see if that can help the QL to contract. But I don't think the QL probably needs to be contracting. I think it's probably creating a little compression. So work on getting the psoas to contract. So there's some gentle hip strengthening exercises could be good. So where you take the hip into flexion, that could be good. Let's see. So we have a further comment from Vartika. My symptoms started with typical hypertonic pelvic floor dysfunction, difficulty urinating, emptying, incomplete defecation, but now it feels like I'm losing the poo sensation. Yeah, the losing of the poo sensation is, it's difficult when you start to feel like you're losing it. You have to really, I call it a superpower. I think the ability to sense that you have to pee or to poo is a superpower, because when it's gone, dysfunction will raise its ugly head. So it's very, very important that you try to be aware of it. Now, when you start losing the sensation, it can be good to create a pattern, like a bowel pattern if you can. So for example, my pattern, because I struggle a little bit with the sensation, my pattern is that I get up in the morning very relaxed. I go down, I drink 2 cups of coffee, and I sit relaxed without disturbance, and I go. And I take also flaxseed every day to make sure that everything keeps moving, because it can be an issue. I also go the very first little hint, like just a tiny wee sensation, and I'm gone. I don't wait. The big problem comes when people delay. So when you get that sensation that you have to go poo and then you don't do it, then the sensation can disappear. So if you've had hypertonicity, so contracting of the sphincter is sending a message like it's not time now. So your pattern, you need to maybe be working on do some pelvic floor relaxation exercises first thing in the morning, and then whatever stimulates your system to get you to go. So I discovered actually it's not the drinking of the coffee for me, it's the smell of the coffee. So maybe there's something like that can trigger you. And the little tiniest hint, you need to go right away, but create a pattern, create a little bit of regularity by doing that thing all of the time. Create a little bit of consistency, and then your body will fall into rhythm. That's what I suggest. I hope that helps. Let me see. Chrissy, your relaxation videos helped me so much. Thank you. You're very welcome. But my question is, are dilators necessary for me, or is it enough for me to put the finger in? It is actually enough to put the finger in. I'll show you. I have a dilator here. This is the smallest size. Well, actually, I think maybe this is the second size dilator up, but you can see that it's a little bit bigger than my finger. Now, 2 fingers is a little bit wider. You can do like this so that you have something that's a little bit more. And then if these things they are expensive. If you don't want to buy these things, it is also possible to buy other things in the like in the pharmacy that can work. But dilation really helps. If you need dilation, then it can really help to get things to relax. These are quite soft as well. Like, I mean, it's really not much different, I think, than a finger. So let's see. How do you contract the psoas? My physical therapist told me it's difficult to find and work the psoas. It's not that difficult. So it's a hip flexor. So if you want to contract the psoas, you can lift your leg, flex your hip. You can also just lift the knee. So you could lie on your stomach and press your knee into the floor. That's going to turn on the psoas. So try that and see if that works. Actually, I'm going to add that to my list. I'm going to make a video of doing some PNF, or maybe we do some PNF for the QL. I think that's a good idea. Let me see. I'll take that wee question away. Let me see. SVT, thank you very much for your time and hard work. You're very welcome. I'm so glad you've joined the challenge. It's really good that so many of you are joining. I'm actually a little bit blown away by the number of people that registered. I wasn't sure if it would be interesting for people to do, because pelvic floor contractions, they're almost the most boring thing that you can do, but it's a very important part of rehabilitation. But do bear in mind, please, all of you, that doing the pelvic floor exercises alone is not enough. You have to look further away. You have to look at the lower limb, you have to look at the upper limb, the breathing, and just the general pattern of movement in order to really kind of get beyond pain or dysfunction in the body. And the other thing to remember also is that it can be a lot easier to relax into dysfunction than to work your way back to function. Like, moving in the direction of function usually requires effort, whereas it's very easy. If you have pain, it's very easy to just get tighter and tighter and just be like more and more afraid to move than it is to actually move a little into the pain and work at getting the pain to go away. And the same thing goes if you have incontinence or pelvic organ prolapse or other conditions of weakness. It can be very easy to just become more and more afraid of going out and of doing things and moving less and less and less, and then the body breaks down. Things will stop actually working. So really, it takes work, whether you're trying to overcome pain or whether you're trying to build pelvic floor strength and control. It takes work, it takes effort, and it really takes a very kind of holistic approach to get back on the road to recovery. And you really can't leave your mind out. I know I've said it maybe 10 times, that the mind aspect is so important. What you think about your pain, what you think about any dysfunction that you have will impact your ability to be able to deal with it. And the whole point with the Flower Empowered is that you empower yourself. So you have to tell yourself, I got this, I can do this, I'm going to get through this. And you can. And, amazing things start to happen when you tell your nervous system, we got this, we're going to do this. Like, your nervous system's like a little buddy that you bring along with you through your life. And they tell you when there's danger. They're very quick to tell you when there's danger. And, it can be very, very easy to just believe that this is something. Always get your pain checked out, of course, if you do have pain, or if you have incontinence or any of these things, always get them checked out. But you also need to reassure your nervous system that you can do it, that you can heal. The body is a self-healing organism. You stimulate it with the right kind of exercise, with the right thoughts, with the right movement, the right sleep, the right nutrition. Amazing things will happen, really amazing. Let me see. Chrissy's saying, I'm confused. I thought if I'm able to put my finger in, it means my body feels safe. Oh yeah, so if you're trying to move up, if you can put your finger in, then you should be able to put 2 fingers in or 3 fingers in. If you can put your finger in, that is a sign that the nervous system feels safe. If you can let somebody else put their finger in, that is a sign that your nervous system feels safe. If you can put your finger in, but you can't let anybody else put their finger in, that's a sign that your nervous system doesn't feel safe. So there is actually, there's a study where they had people pinch their thumb. So they're just the thumbnail, just like this. Pinch as hard as you possibly can. And you can pinch really, really hard. The pressure that they measured was quite substantial. And then they had somebody who the person knew squeeze the thumb really, really hard, and it hurt. Now, not a huge amount, but it hurt. But then they had a stranger squeeze the thumb, and a tiny fraction of that pressure created extreme pain. And it's a little bit the same when it comes to the pelvic floor. You have to get your nervous system to feel safe. And you might feel safe with yourself, but you might not yet feel safe with somebody else. So that could be the doctor that's going to do the exam. It could be the pelvic floor physical therapist that's going to help to release the pressure. But if you understand that your nervous system feeling safe with you might not be the same as it feeling safe with somebody else, then you can start to reassure your nervous system before doing those other things. So, Chrissy, the point with the dilators, I'm going to put your, I put your little comment up here so that people can see what we're talking about. The point with the dilators, with going up in size in the dilators, is that with vaginismus, the vaginismus is the nervous system responding to the fear of danger by contracting. And very often, one finger might not create the fear where the pelvic floor kind of spasms. Two fingers might create that fear, or three fingers or four fingers, or a man-sized object can create that spasm. So the reason that you use the dilators is basically to check, okay, my nervous system's okay with a finger. My nervous system is okay with, say, size 1 dilator. It's okay with size 2 dilator. Is it okay with size 3 dilator? And if you'll notice if you can get all the way up to the largest size dilator, that's a sign that your nervous system is comfortable and happy with you. Now, when you want to be intimate with somebody else, then you need to be comfortable with them so that they can also put in the 1 size dilator, two size dilator, 3, or a speculum if you go for a pelvic exam. I hope that makes sense. It is literally down to the nervous system feeling safe or unsafe, and it's a nervous system response that creates that spasm that prevents penetration with vaginismus. If that didn't answer your question, just pop another message up there. I hope that answered your question. Let's see. Chloe, 12 weeks postpartum with rectocele, cystocele, possibly urethrocoele too, okay, which appeared 5 weeks postpartum, working with a women's health PT. What are the chances my pop will go away? It's very likely that you will manage your pop. So a pelvic organ prolapse is just it's a point of weakness in your tissues. Now, very often, I talked about this in the last couple of Q&As, very often the images of a pelvic organ prolapse that show what the prolapse look like, that is showing what the prolapse looks like under pressure. But the normal lay of the land, so the way the tissues sit normally, isn't in the blown up state. So I like to say that you blow up your pop balloon. So the pop isn't always full of pressure making it expand. So it's not always a bulge. It's a bulge when it comes under excess intra-abdominal pressure. Now, if you can get, say, excess tension removed from the pelvis, so for example, if you have scar tissue from your birth, then your pelvic floor physical therapist should be able to break up that scar tissue so that all of the tissues move a little bit more uniformly. Then it's less likely that that point of weakness will be as extreme. So when there is excess pressure, the tissues should expand more uniformly and you shouldn't get a bulge. So in that case, you might not have any more symptoms. Also, if you can get your pelvic floor to just sit a little higher by strengthening it, so by improving the balance of tension, so the length-tension relationship through the pelvic floor, that can help to provide a little bit more support. So when there is excess pressure coming down from above, there is a more supportive structure there to prevent it. And then the next thing is for the balance of intra-abdominal pressure. So the ability of the core basically to work in synergy with the pelvic floor to to hold the tension if you're lifting something very heavy, or for it to be able to expand sufficiently so that you're not holding the core and sending excess pressure down. But it is a question of, I would say, management. So you can, if you have a prolapse, then the prolapse might always be there, but you might never feel it. It might never give you any problems. You need always to learn to manage it. And I think only in extreme situations, when it is a very late grade prolapse, you might need surgery, but the surgery should be very rare. And if you have a prolapse that's, say, stage 3 or thereabouts, you may need to use a pessary, and that will be some internal support, and that can help a lot if your prolapse is symptomatic. But don't give up. I mean, do the work with your pelvic floor physiotherapist. They can do really amazing things by releasing scar tissue, getting you to do relaxation exercises, teaching you to strengthen the pelvic floor, teaching you to breathe properly, and then to manage intra-abdominal pressures. I hope that helps to answer your question. Laura has a question. Maybe you're already told, but what were your symptoms and how did you resolve it? How long did it take you? Are you pain-free now? Less pain or discomfort? I'm curious about my story. Right, okay, so my story, I assume some people have already read it. There's information both on the flowerimpowered.com on the website, and also my very first video I talked a little bit about the cheese grater. So I went to the doctor because I was practicing yoga. I started practicing yoga and I was doing yoga farts. So I couldn't understand why, when I was doing yoga, my little vagina was playing the trumpet. And I decided that I would mention this to my gynecologist when I went to have my IUD checked. I had one of those little intrauterine devices for contraception. So I'm laying back with the legs up and he's having a look, and I said, oh, by the way, I'm doing yoga and I keep doing these yoga farts. What's that all about? And he said, oh, well, you're very open down there. So now I was very shocked to be told that you're very open. I was like, what does that even mean? So he told me that I had an episiotomy, which I did, and he said that the episiotomy hadn't been repaired properly. So my pelvic floor muscles were all separate, basically. So the perineum area was just a big opening, and he said, so that explains it, and you have a rectocele, and yeah, you need surgery. So I didn't think there was anything wrong with me, but this guy said I needed surgery. And he decided in that same surgery to put some mesh under my bladder, so as a preventative measure, so I would never have to have have incontinence, and I would never have to worry about leakage, because I'd done marathons and triathlons and all sorts of things, and I had maybe 10 instances of leaking in my life. So I had mentioned that when he said I needed this surgery. So anyhow, I go and I have this surgery 2 weeks later. Now, bear in mind, I didn't know that I needed any surgery. I didn't think there was anything at all wrong with my lady parts. I thought they were perfectly fine. And the episiotomy that I'd had was 20 years earlier. So this wasn't it wasn't a recent thing. It was like, he basically said, you just walked around your whole life with a broken vagina. Anyhow, I went ahead with this surgery, and from the day this mesh was implanted, I was in absolutely terrible pain, and I tried everything to get rid of the pain. The pain just wouldn't go away. I stopped running because I thought maybe the running was creating this friction that was causing the pain. I had really bad burning cystitis every single day until they took the mesh away. It was a year and a half. I had stopped drinking alcohol, stopped drinking coffee, carbonated drinks, stopped eating anything that was even slightly acidic. I did all of these things to try to make it better. And eventually this guy said, okay, it is the mesh that's causing all these problems. But he wouldn't take it away. He said it's permanent and we can't remove it. So, you're kind of stuck with it. So I went to the UK, paid privately to go to the UK to a surgeon there who removed the mesh, told me that there was a very high likelihood I would be incontinent for the rest of my life, and also told me that the rectocele that I had repaired was still there. So after that, I had about 2 weeks after the surgery. It was very swollen and I was leaking a little but not bad, and I thought, oh, this isn't too bad. But then the swelling went down and I was completely incontinent. I couldn't get up and walk to the door without everything coming out. I had to close my yoga studio. I was very devastated, thought my life was over. And then I realized that I either had to accept that I was never going to have a life again, give up on everything that I had planned for my future, or I could do something about it. So I started working on trying to rebuild my strength. Now at that stage I had overactive bladder, so I just had constant urgency and pain in my bladder, and I just couldn't do anything. And so I got control first of the urgency and the overactive bladder. So it took a little bit of time. I did bladder training and I got everything back under control. And then I started to work on building a little bit of strength into the pelvic floor. And that it took about 18 months to regain continence. The prolapse, it's always going to be there. Like it's never actually going to go away, but it doesn't really give me any problems unless I am symptomatic. I worked through getting back to being strong. I started training again, and I've had bouts of hypertonicity with all of the strength training that everything that I was doing. But I balanced it very often with lengthening, with adding relaxation exercises in. So for the most part, from a pain perspective, actually the pain, I had really, really bad shoulder pain. It was absolutely terrible. Thought my life was over with that as well. But with the pelvis, the pain that was never my biggest symptom. The incontinence was by far my biggest issue. And that's now under control. So that's kind of my story. Then I realized I had nobody to help me. And I realized that, I sat alone. I sat and cried by myself, realized nobody knew what I was going through. I couldn't tell people why I was closing my studio or why I wasn't doing all the things I used to do. And then I realized, well, if I'm alone suffering like this, then there's bound to be others. And that's when I decided that I needed to talk. Like all of those, I have so many friends in the pelvic mesh community, so women that have been mesh injured, and they were like trying to get the laws changed, trying to get pharmaceutical companies to stop implanting crappy plastic in women's bodies. And I realized that it's too late. It's too late by the time that shit is implanted in your body. Excuse the language, YouTube. They're going to ban this video. And I realized that the way actually to make a change is to tell people before they've gone there what the potential risks are, and to also, if I could regain my continence, then anybody can. I mean, that's just what I think. So that's my story. That's it. So anywho, it's getting a wee bit late. We're over an hour now. I have lots of comments here. Let me see. So glad to find you. I have been suffering from vaginismus. Your videos are helping. Oh, that's good. I'm so glad. Laura, what a story. Thanks for sharing. You're very, very welcome. Surgery, if you can avoid it, do avoid it. It is, surgery can be so helpful under the right circumstances, but it shouldn't be the first thing you try. If you have any kind of pelvic floor dysfunction, at least give yourself a year of consistency. I mean, you would not believe how consistent I had to be to get back to functioning. And, coming away from really bad incontinence to being back under some level of control was, I'm not going to say easy, but that part was shorter. But going from having mild stress incontinence to being completely continent was a longer journey. And it was on that journey that I realized that doing your pelvic floor exercises, lying on your bed or sitting on a chair, that's not going to help you when you go to reach for something and you sneeze, or when you jump, or when you have to run for the bus, or any of these things. So if you want your pelvic floor to function in all these ways, then you have to teach it. And this is why the 30-day challenge isn't just lying down doing pelvic floor exercises, and also it's not just up doing very crazy mad exercises. It's very much focused on starting to feel how your pelvic floor reacts in first very controlled ways, and then we're going to kind of move it out a little bit. So okay, one more question. I have a question about my shoulder pain. Did your shoulder pain go away? My shoulder pain, oh my God, the pain of my life. Yes, it went away, and I can't tell you why, because I tried everything. And eventually, and quite suddenly actually, it went away. And then I was very nervous that it wasn't really gone. I mean, I had actually lost the ability to extend. This time last year, I couldn't stretch. I wasn't able to do my yoga. It was really, it was so disheartening. But now it's back and it's functioning, and I'm back to loading my shoulders. So I'm doing pull and push exercises and all sorts of wonderful things. So it did take time. And all of the things that I did for my shoulder are all of the things that I preach for the pelvic floor. So just looking at the shoulder is never going to be enough. You need to look at the whole body, you need to look at the mind, and you need to also think. What you think about your pain really impacts how it manifests. So initially when I had the shoulder pain, I thought that it was breast cancer. I was like, oh my God, I have it's probably coming from my breast and going into my underarm, and that's why I have this pain. I was convinced that that's what it was, and the pain was awful. But do you see, when I of course went and got checked, and there was nothing wrong with my breast, and that really changed the level of pain. Now, I still had really bad pain. I still couldn't make a lot of normal functional movements, but it wasn't as severe. And that's when I started to look at the very strong connection between thoughts and pain. And that really, it made a huge difference. So if you're having severe pain, what you're thinking about it, how sinister you think it is, will impact how it feels. So if you've been to all the doctors and you've had all the tests, they've done the MRIs and all the other stuff, and they can't see anything wrong, then you have to say to yourself, okay, I shouldn't be, maybe I shouldn't be telling myself that this is really, really, really sinister. And instead, I should be telling myself that I got this. I'm going to get through this. So I applied my pelvic floor philosophy to my shoulder. Okay, there's one more. I'm going to take one more question, and then I'm going to finish up. So what do you recommend if you've gained control? Thank you from my heart. But I feel like I'm all or nothing when contracting, with any medium or gentle holding, or without any medium holding or any gentle endurance. So when it comes to regaining control, that I'm not sure if I got your question correctly. I'll just read it one more time. So all or nothing with contraction. So maybe you're not finding that gentle contraction. You're only getting the maximum strength or the relaxed. The reason for going for that gentle contraction is so that you can hold that sustained contraction with movement. And what that is doing is that's basically going to help to retrain a higher level of tone in the pelvic floor. And this is very important if you have incontinence or pelvic organ prolapse. A pelvic floor with lower tone will sit a little bit lower. So a stronger pelvic floor sits a little higher than a low tone pelvic floor. And the teaching the low tone, teaching your pelvic floor to be able to hold for a while, involves having control. Now, when all you can do is a maximum strength contraction or nothing, there is a possibility that it's not your pelvic floor that's putting in all the work. Because when you do a maximum strength contraction, you also get recruitment from other muscles. And what I found when I was doing my own rehabilitation was that my maximum strength contractions were coming more from my internal obliques, so from muscles in my stomach, some of my ab muscles, and a little bit my glutes, where they were doing a lot of the work when I was doing the contractions. I actually bought one of those LV pelvic floor trainers, and I was trying to play the game, but what I found was, well, the game I was doing it with everything else. Like, I was really trying to win with everything but my pelvic floor. And then I realized, okay, I can do really strong contractions, but I'm actually using lots of other stuff. So what if I just try to reach my pelvic floor? And that's when I started with the feeling the pelvic floor and realizing, ooh, left side, no response, nothing, empty, almost like a hole. Right side, yeah, that's moving when I do something. And that's when I started to kind of like, okay, really get into using the touch to get the contraction, and then using the subtlety of connection. So just a small contraction. So if you feel like you're all or nothing, please try to take a step back, and please just try to feel, and then try to see if you can just take a gentle hold, or even maybe don't even think contraction, think awareness. If you can bring some awareness to the pelvic floor and then move, but with the abs relaxed. So you can try with the yoga class tomorrow night. So try to get a little contraction, but allow the belly still to be a little bit soft. We will do co-contraction with the stomach next week. So where we have the abs and the pelvic floor contracting. Now, I will say to you, if you have no pelvic floor problems, you have no leakage, you have no dysfunction of any sort, then it matters a lot less whether or not you can actually do these gentle contractions and get that level of control. If you don't have any control and you are incontinent, it's very important that you learn to get this control, because you need to retrain the holding. You need to retrain the nervous system basically to take that grip. And when you do it enough, so you do it consistently through different practices of movement, so you do this through a movement practice, what you'll find is that you eventually don't have to do it, but your nervous system holds the tone. So you actually get to increase the tone. I hope that makes sense. And I'm going to stop now. So thank you all so much for all the lovely comments that I got, and thank you all for coming on. And I hope that you guys can stick with me for this challenge if you are doing the challenge. If you're not doing the challenge and you're looking at pelvic pain, I will keep posting the relaxation videos on Tuesday. And if there's any other videos, if there's something that you think you'd really like to see, please do let me know. I do have a little list, a little backlog of videos that I want to make, but I'm always looking for new ideas. So please do let me know what you would like to see. And you're very welcome, Nick. All right, everybody, take care. Have a lovely rest of your week. I'll do a live again, same time next week. And if you have questions beforehand, if you can't make the live, you can just send me them in a little email or put them on a little comment to the live, and I can answer them on the call.